Starting on page 71, a little over halfway down. Right after Montag had that flashback where he was talking to Faber, that incident that started things a year ago. Mildred shrieked with laughter in the hall. Montag went to his bedroom closet and flipped through his file wallet to the heading Future Investigations? Faber's name was there. He hadn't turned it in and he hadn't erased it. He dialed the call on the secondary phone. The phone on the far end of the line called Faber's name a dozen times before the professor answered in a faint voice. Montag identified himself and was met with lengthy silence. Yes, Mr. Montag? Professor Faber, I have a rather odd question to ask. How many copies of the Bible are left in this country? I don't know what you're talking about. I want to know if there are any copies left at all. This is some sort of trap. I can't just talk to anyone on the phone. How many copies of Shakespeare and Plato? None. You know as well as I do. None. Faber hung up. Montag put down the phone. None? A thing he knew, of course, from the firehouse listings, but somehow he had wanted to hear it from Faber himself. In the hall, Mildred's face was suffused with excitement. Well, the ladies are coming over. Montag showed her a book. This is the Old and New Testament, and don't start that again. It might be the last copy in this part of the world. You've got to hand it back tonight, don't you? Captain Beatty knows you've got it, doesn't he? I don't think he knows which book I stole. But how do I choose a substitute? Do I turn in Mr. Jefferson? Mr. Thoreau? Which is least valuable? If I pick a substitute and Beatty does know which book I stole, he'll guess we've an entire library here. Mildred's mouth twitched. See what you're doing? You'll ruin us. Who's more important, me or that Bible? She was beginning to shriek now, sitting there like a wax doll melting in its own heat. He could hear Beatty's voice. Sit down, Montag. Watch. Delicately, like the petals of a flower. Light the first page, light the second page. Each page becomes a black butterfly. Beautiful, huh? Light the third page from the second, and so on, chain-smoking, chapter by chapter, all the silly things the words mean, all the false promises, all the second-hand notions, and time-worn philosophies. There sat Beatty, perspiring gently, the floor littered with swarms of black moths that had died in a single storm. Mildred stopped screaming as quickly as she started. Montag was not listening. There's only one thing to do, he said. Sometime before tonight, when I gave the book to Beatty, I've got to have a duplicate made. You'll be here for the White Clown tonight, and the lady's coming over, cried Mildred. Montag stopped at the door with his back turned. Millie? A silence. What? Millie, does the White Clown love you? No answer. Millie, he licked his lips. Does your family love you? Love you very much? Love you with all their heart and soul, Millie? He felt her blinking slowly at the back of his neck. Why'd you ask a silly question like that? He felt he wanted to cry, but nothing would happen to his eyes or his mouth. If you see that dog outside, said Mildred, give him a kick for me. He hesitated, listening at the door. He opened it and stepped out. The rain had stopped and the sun was setting in the clear sky. The street and the lawn and the porch were empty. He let his breath go in a great sigh. He slammed the door. He was on the subway. I'm numb, he thought. When did the numbness really begin in my face, in my body? The night I kicked the pill bottle in the dark, like kicking a buried mine. The numbness will go away, he thought. It'll take time, but I'll do it, or Faber will do it for me. Someone somewhere will give me back the old face and the old hands the way they were. Even the smile, he thought, the old burnt-in smile, that's gone. I'm lost without it. The subway fled past him, cream tile, jet black, numerals and darkness, more darkness, and the total adding itself. Once as a child, he had sat upon a yellow dune by the sea in the middle of the blue and hot summer day, trying to fill a sieve with sand because some cruel cousin had said, fill this sieve and you'll get a dime. And the faster he poured, the faster it sifted through a hot whispering. His hands were tired, the sand was boiling, the sieve was empty. Seated there in the midst of July, without a sound, he felt the tears move down his cheeks. Now, as the vacuum underground rushed him through the dead cellars of town, jolting him, he remembered the terrible logic of that sieve, and he looked down and saw that he was carrying the Bible open. There were people in the suction train, but he held the book in his hands, and the silly thought came to him, if you read fast and read all, maybe some of the sand will stay in the sieve. But he read, and the words fell through, and he thought, in a few hours there will be Beatty, and here will be me handing this over, so no phrase must escape me. Each line must be memorized. I will myself to do it. He clenched the book in his fists. Trumpets blared. Denham's dentrifice. Shut up, thought Montague. Consider the lilies of the field. Denham's dentrifice. They toil not, Denham's. Consider the lilies of the field. Shut up, shut up. That's from the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know, they're beautifully clothed and look how the Lord takes care of them and will not do much more for you who he loves. Just in case you're wondering, in case you couldn't place that, that's part of the Sermon on the Mount. Dentrifice. He tore the book open and flicked the pages and felt of them as if he were blind. He picked at the shape of the individual letters, not blinking. Denham, spell D-E-N. They toil not, neither do they. A fierce whisper of hot sand through the empty sea. Denham's does it. Consider the lilies, the lilies, the lilies. Denham's dental detergent. Shut up, shut up, shut up. It was a plea, a cry so terrible that Montague found himself on his feet, the shocked inhabitants of the loud car staring, moving back from this man with the insane, gorged face, the gibbering, dry mouth, the flapping book in his fists. The people who had been sitting a moment before, tapping their feet to the rhythm of Denham's dentrifice, Denham's dandy dental detergent, Denham's dentrifice detergent, Denham's dentrifice 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The people whose mouths had been fairly twitching the words dentrifice, dentrifice, dentrifice. The train radio vomited upon Montague in retaliation a great tonload of music made of tin, copper, silver, chromium, and brass. The people were pounded into submission. They did not run. There was no place to run. The great air train fell down its shaft in the earth. Lilies of the field. Denham's, lilies, I said. The people stared. Call the guard. The man's off. Nullview! The train hissed to its stop. Nullview! I cried. Denham's, I whispered. Montague's mouth barely moved. Lilies. The train door whistled open. Montague stood. The door, gasped, started shut. Only then did he leap past the other passengers, screaming in his mind, plunged through the sliding door only in time. He ran on the white tiles up through the tunnels, ignoring the escalators because he wanted to feel his feet move, arms swing, legs clench, unclench, feel his throat go raw with air. A voice drifted out to him, Denham's, 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 and the train hissed like a snake. The train vanished in its hole. Who is it? Montague out here. What do you want? Let me in. What do you want? Let me in. I haven't done anything. I'm alone, damn it. You swear it? I swear. The front door opened slowly. Faber peered out, looking very old in the light and very fragile and very much afraid. The old man looked as if he had not been out of the house in years. He and the white plaster walls inside were much the same. There was white in the flesh of his mouth and his cheeks, and his hair was white, and his eyes had faded, with white in the vague blueness there. Then his eyes touched on the book under Montague's arm, and he did not look so old anymore, and not quite as fragile. Slowly, his fear went. I'm sorry, one has to be careful. He looked at the book under Montague's arm and could not stop. So it's true. Montague stepped inside, the door shut. Sit down. Faber backed up as if he feared the book might vanish if he took his eyes from it. Behind him, the door to the bedroom stood open, and in that room, a litter of machinery and steel tools were strewn upon a desktop. Montague had only a glimpse before Faber, seeing Montague's attention diverted, turned quickly and shut the bedroom door and stood holding the knob with a trembling hand. His gaze returned unsteadily to Montague, who was now seated with the book in his lap. The book? Where did you? I stole it. Faber, for the first time, raised his eyes and looked directly into Montague's face. You're brave. No, said Montague. My wife is dying. A friend of mine's already dead. Someone who may have been a friend was burnt less than 24 hours ago. You're the only one I knew might help me to see. Faber's hands itched on his knees. May I? Sorry. Montague gave him the book. It's been a long time. I'm not a religious man, but it's been a long time. Faber turned the pages, stopping here and there to read. It's as good as I remember. Lord, how they changed it in our parlors these days. Christ is one of the family now. I often wonder if God recognizes his own son the way we've dressed him up. Or is it dressed him down? He's a regular peppermint stick now. I'll sugar crystal and saccharine when he isn't making veiled references to certain commercial products that even commercial products that every worshiper absolutely needs. Faber sniffed the book. I wonder if there's some truth in there, right? If there are ways that we dress Jesus up or down in order to fit our needs, right? Just like they use him to like sell stuff, like that's not really what Jesus is all about. I wonder if there's a truth in there, right? Like they have lost who Jesus is because they don't want to actually be forced to think. I wonder if we do that too. Do you know that book smells like nutmeg or some spice from a foreign land? I loved to smell them when I was a boy. Lord, there were a lot of lovely books once before we let them go. Faber turned the pages. Mr. Montag, you are looking at a coward. I saw the way things were going a long time back. I said nothing. I'm one of the innocents who could have spoken up and out when no one would listen to the guilty, but I did not speak and thus became guilty myself. I love that line. I did not speak and thus became guilty myself. And when finally they set the structure to burn the books using the firemen, I grunted a few times and subsided, for there were no others grunting or yelling with me by then. Now it's too late. Faber closed the Bible. Well, suppose you tell me why you came here. Nobody listens anymore. I can't talk to the walls because they're yelling at me. I can't talk to my wife. She listens to the walls. I just want someone to hear what I have to say. Maybe if I talk long enough, it'll make sense. And I want you to teach me to understand what I read. Faber examined Montag's thin, blue-jowled face. How did you get shaken up? What knocked the torch out of your hands? I don't know. We have everything we need to be happy, but we aren't happy. Something is missing. I looked around. The only thing I positively knew was gone was the books I'd burned in 10 or 12 years, so I thought books might help. You're a hopeless romantic, said Faber. It would be funny if it were not serious. It's not the books you need, it's some of the things that were once in the books. The same things could be in the parlor families today. The same infinite detail and awareness could be projected through radios and televisors, but are not. No, it's not books at all you're looking for. Take it where you can find it in old phonograph records, old motion pictures, and in old friends. Look for it in nature and look for it in yourself. Books were only one type of receptacle where we stored a lot of things we were afraid we might forget. There is nothing magical in them at all. The magic is only in what books say. How they stitch the patches of the universe together into one garment for us. Of course you couldn't know this. Of course you still can't understand what I mean when I say this. You are intuitively right. That's what counts. 3 things are missing, which we'll read in a second, but I love his distinction here, right, of it's not books necessarily that this society is missing. It's thought, it's engagement, it's agreeing with things, it's disagreeing with things, it's forcing yourself to do things that are uncomfortable, it's forcing to remember, to engage, to talk, to listen. Smart dude. Anyway, there are 3 things that are missing. Number 1, do you know why books such as this are so important? Because they have quality. And what does the word quality mean? To me, it means texture. This book has pores. It has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past in an infinite profusion. The more pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. That's my definition anyway. Telling detail, fresh detail. The good writers touch life often. The mediocre ones run a quick hand over her. The bad ones rape her and leave her for the flies. And although that part makes me, I wish that they used different language there. The good writers touch life often, right? It's like engaging with life and not using it, not like touching at it, poking at it, and then moving on, not like showing that you are more powerful than life. It's engaging in life, right? That's what makes story, what makes life powerful and important. So now do you see why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces, poreless, hairless, expressionless. We are living in a time when flowers are trying to live on flowers instead of growing on good rain and black loam. Even fireworks, for all their prettiness, come from the chemistry of the earth. Yet somehow we think we can grow feeding on flowers and fireworks without completing the cycle back to reality. Do you know the legend of Hercules and Antaeus, the giant wrestler, whose strength was incredible so long as he stood firmly on the earth? But when he was held rootless in midair by Hercules, he perished easily. If there isn't something in that legend for us today, in this city, in our time, then I am completely insane. Well, there we have the first thing I said we needed: quality, texture of information. And the second? Leisure. Oh, but we've plenty of off hours. Off hours, yes, but time to think? If you're not driving 100 miles an hour at a clip where you can't think of anything else but the danger, then you're playing some game or sitting in some room where you can't argue with the 4-wall televisor. Why, the televisor is real. It is immediate. It has dimension. It tells you what to think and blasts it in. It must be right. It seems so right. It rushes you on so quickly to its own conclusions. Your mind hasn't time to protest. What nonsense. Only that family is people. I beg pardon? My wife says books aren't real. Thank God for that. You can shut them, say, hold on a moment. You can play God to it. But who has ever torn himself from the claw that encloses you when you drop a seed in a TV parlor? It grows you any shape it wishes. It is an environment as real as the world. It becomes and is the truth. Books can be beaten down with reason, but with all my knowledge and skepticism, I have never been able to argue with a 100-piece symphony orchestra, full color, 3 dimensions, and being in and part of those incredible parlors. As you see, my parlor is nothing but 4 plaster walls, and here, he held out 2 small rubber plugs for my ears when I ride the subway jets. Denim centrifuges, they toil not, neither do they spin, said Montag, eyes shut. Where do we go from here? Would books help us? So here, Faber is just kind of pointing out, like, the way that, like, distractions can be so real and kind of force themselves in, so, like, you can't think of anything else, right? It's hard sometimes when you're, like, imagine you were in a room where, like, all 4 walls are the TV. It would be hard to ignore that, right? Hard to close it, hard to put that down, hard to not be absorbed with whatever it is they're trying to put in, right? A book you can close, but, like, you can't do that with the things, with the entertainment that is being forced on people to keep them from thinking in this world. Only if a third necessary thing could be given us. Number 1, as I said, quality of information. Number 2, leisure to digest it. It's important to, like, have time to, like, think about things. And number 3, the right to carry out actions based on what we learn from the interaction of the first 2. And I hardly think a very old man and a fireman turned sour could do much this late in the game. I can get books. You're running a risk. That's the good part of dying. When you have nothing to lose, you can run any risk you want. Here, you've said an interesting thing, laughed Faber, without having read it. Aren't things like that in books? But it came off the top of my mind. All the better. You didn't fancy it up for me or for anyone, even yourself. So here he's getting at, like, sometimes the truth is just, like, simple. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be like a 4-wall television, like, throwing things at us. It doesn't have to be like these ads that are always running in the subways that are, like, fancy and memorable. Sometimes the truth is simple. It's a whisper. It's quote unquote small in presentation, but, like, big in its simple truth. Montag leaned forward. This afternoon, I thought that if it turned out the books were worthwhile, we might get a press and print some extra copies. We? You and I. Oh, no, Faber said. But let me tell you my plan. If you insist on telling me, I must ask you to leave. But aren't you interested? Not if you start talking the sort of talk that might get me burnt for my trouble. The only way I could possibly listen to you would be is if somehow the fireman structure itself could be burnt. Now, if you suggest that we print extra books and arrange to have them hidden in firemen's houses all over the country, so that seeds of suspicion would be sown among those arsonists, bravo, I'd say. Plant the books, turn in an alarm, and see the firemen's houses burn? Is that what you mean? Faber raised his brows and looked at Montag as if he were seeing a new man. I was joking. If you thought it would be a plan worth trying, I'd have to take your word, and it would help. You can't guarantee things like that. After all, when we had all the books we needed, we still insisted on finding the highest cliff to jump off. But we do need a breather. We do need knowledge, and perhaps in 1,000 years, we might pick smaller cliffs to jump off. The books are to remind us what asses and fools we are. They're Caesar's Praetorian Guard, whispering as the parade roars down the avenue. Remember, Season, thou art mortal. Most of us can't rush around, talk to everyone, know all the cities of the world. We haven't time, money, or that many friends. The things you're looking for, Montag, are in the world, but the only way the average chap will ever see 99% of them is in a book. Don't ask for guarantees, and don't look to be saved in any one thing, person, machine, or library. Do your own bit of saving, and if you drown, or at least die knowing, you were headed for shore. Montag got up and began to pace the room. Well? Asked Montag. You're absolutely serious? Oh, sorry. Faber got up and began to pace the room, and then Montag said, well, and then he said, you're absolutely serious. Absolutely. It's an insidious plan, if I do say so myself. Faber glanced nervously at his bedroom door. To see the firehouses burn across the land, destroyed as hotbeds of treason. The salamander devours his tail. Oh God, I have a list of firemen's residences everywhere with some sort of underground. Can't trust people. That's the dirty part. You and I and who else would start the fires? Aren't there professors like yourself, former writers, historians, linguists, dead or ancient? The older the better. They'll go unnoticed. You know dozens admit it. Oh, there are many actors alone who haven't acted Pirandello or Shaw or Shakespeare for years because their plays are too aware of the world. We could use their anger, and we could use the honest rage of those historians who haven't written a line for 40 years. True, we might form classes in thinking and reading. Yes! And so what's happening here is we have like Montag with his new enthusiasm, who's kind of like helping inspiring Faber, who obviously has been upset, has known that they need and want like knowledge and information, but at first Faber was like, no, we can't do anything, right? Like, we're gonna die. That's too much. It's too hard. And Montag, who's like new and fresh into this desire of knowledge, is like, I want more of this. So in a way, his like, I don't know, his enthusiasm is kind of pushing them forward in this plan. I don't know if it's a good plan to like plant books in all these firemen's houses, but we'll find out. But that would just nibble the edges. The whole culture shot through. The skeletons need melting and reshaping. Good God, it isn't as simple as just picking up a book you laid down half a century ago. Remember, the firemen are rarely necessary. The public itself stopped reading of its own accord. You firemen provide a circus now and then, at which buildings are set off and crowds gather for the pretty blaze, but it's a small slideshow indeed, and hardly necessary to keep things in line. So few want to be rebels anymore, and out of those few, most, like myself, scare easily. That's true and wise. A lot of these rebels are afraid, right? They feel like there's nothing they can do. Can you dance faster than the white clown? Shout louder than Mr. Gimmick and the parlor families? If you can, you'll win your way, Montag. In any event, you're a fool. People are having fun. Committing suicide, murdering, because they literally are doing those things, but it's okay because they're having fun and being happy, and that's what's most important. A bomber fight had been moving east all the time they talked, and only now did the two men stop and listen, feeling the great jet sound tremble inside themselves. Patience, Montag. Let the war turn off the families. Our civilization is flinging itself to pieces. Stand back from the centrifuge. There has to be someone ready when it blows up. What? Men quoting Milton? Saying, I remember Sophocles? Reminding the survivors that man has his good side too? You only gather up their stones to hurl at each other. Montag, go home. Go to bed. Why waste your final hours racing about your cage, denying you're a squirrel? So again, he's trying to be like, meh, dude, just accept it. Like, there's nothing you can do. Then you don't care anymore? I care so much I'm sick. And you won't help me? Good night, good night. Montag's hand picked up the Bible. He saw what his hands had done, and he looked surprised. Would you like to own this? Faber said, I'd give my right arm. Montag stood there and waited for the next thing to happen. His hands by themselves, like two men working together, began to rip the pages from the book. The hands tore the flyleaf, and then the first and then the second page. Idiot, what are you doing? Faber sprang up as if he had been struck. He fell against Montag. Montag warded him off and let his hands continue. 6 more pages fell to the floor. He picked them up and wadded the paper under Faber's gaze. Don't, oh, don't, said the old man. Who can stop me? I'm a fireman. I can burn you. The old man stood looking at him. You wouldn't. I could. The book, don't tear it anymore. Faber sank into a chair, his face very white, his mouth trembling. Don't make me feel any more tired. What do you want? I want you to teach me. So here again, you have Faber being afraid, right? Knowing what's right, knowing that the ideas and the thoughts and the challenges in these books are important, and he's too afraid to do anything. And so Montag, I think, is trying to like force him, like scare him almost into being courageous. Because again, like Faber is the one who sees something wrong but doesn't say anything about it, just like he admitted earlier. And that's a problem, right? When you see something wrong and you refuse to do anything about it. Fear is a real thing, but like Montag is like, come on, dude, we gotta do something about this. I need you to teach me. All right, all right. Montag put the book down. He began to unwad the crumpled paper and flatten it out as the old man watched tiredly. Faber shook his head as if he were waking up. Montag, have you any money? Some, for $500. Why? Bring it. I know a man who printed our college paper half a century ago. That was the year I came to class at the start of the new semester and found only one student to sign up for drama from As We Please to O'Neill. You see? How like a beautiful statue of ice it was melting in the sun. I remember the newspapers dying like huge moths. No one wanted them back. No one missed them. And then the government, seeing how advantageous it was to have people reading only about passionate lips and the fist in the stomach, circled the situation on with your fire eater. So, Montag, there's this unemployed printer. We might start a few books and wait on the war to break the pattern and give us the push we need. A few bombs and the families in the walls of all the houses, like the Harlequin rats, will shut up. In the silence, our stage whisper might carry. They both stood looking at the book on the table. I've tried to remember, said Montag, but hell, it's gone when I turn my head. God, how I want something to say to the captain. He's read enough, so he has all the answers, or seems to have. His voice is like butter. I'm afraid he'll talk me back the way I was only a week ago, pumping a kerosene hose. I thought, God, what fun. The old man nodded. Those who don't build must burn. It's as old as history and juvenile delinquents. So that's what I am. There's some of that in all of us. Montag moved toward the front door. Can you help me in any way tonight with the fire, Captain? I need an umbrella to keep off the rain. I'm so damned afraid I'll drown if he gets me again. The old man said nothing, but glanced once more, nervously, at his bedroom. Montag caught the glance. Well? The old man took a deep breath, held it, and let it out. He took another, eyes closed, his mouth tight, and at last exhaled, Montag. The old man turned at last and said, come along. I would actually have let you walk right out of my house. I am a cowardly old fool. Faber opened the bedroom door and led Montag into a small chamber where stood a table upon which a number of metal books lay among a welter of microscopic wire hairs, tiny coils, bobbins, and crystals. What's this? Asked Montag. Proof of my terrible cowardice. I've lived alone so many years, throwing images on walls with my imagination, fiddling with electronics, radio transmission has been my hobby. My cowardice is of such a passion, complementing the revolutionary spirit that lives in its shadow, I was forced to design this. He picked up a small green metal object no larger than a .22 bullet. I paid for all this. How? Playing the stock market, of course, the last refuge in the world for the dangerous intellectual out of a job. Well, I played the market and built all this, and I've waited. I waited, trembling, half a lifetime for someone to speak to me. I dared speak to no one. That day in the park when we sat together, I knew that someday you might drop by with fire or friendship. It was hard to guess. I've had this little item ready for a month, but I almost let you go. I'm that afraid. And so we find he's been afraid and a little bit cowardly, but at the same time, like, he's been doing something. He's been waiting for some help, though, right? Which I think is a human truth that, like, sometimes it's hard to do stuff on your own. But he was going to let Montag walk out, but it was Montag's absolute conviction that what they're doing is right, that it convinced him, like, okay, now is the time to actually do something. It looks like a seashell radio, which is that thing that Mildred always has in her ear that, like, talks to people and, like, keeps her distracted and happy at all times. And something more. It listens. If you put it in your ear, Montag, I can sit comfortably home, warming my frightened bones, and hear and analyze the fireman's world, find its weaknesses without danger. I'm the queen bee, safe in the hive. You will be the drone, the traveling ear. Eventually, I could put out ears into all parts of the city with various men listening and evaluating. If the drones die, I'm still safe at home, tending my fright with a maximum of comfort and a minimum of chance. See how safe I play it? How contemptible I am? Montag placed the green bullet in his own ear. The old man inserted a similar object in his own ear and moved his lip. Montag! The voice was in Montag's head. I hear you! The old man laughed. You're coming over fine, too, Faber whispered, but the voice in Montag's head was clear. Go to the firehouse when it's time. I'll be with you. Let's listen to this Captain Beatty together. He could be one of us, God knows. I'll give you things to say. We'll give him a good show. Do you hate me for this electronic cowardice of mine? Here I am sending you out into the night while I stay behind the lines with my damned ears, listening for you to get your head chopped off. We all do what we do, said Montag. He put the Bible in the old man's hand. Here, I'll chance turning in a substitute. Tomorrow, I'll see the unemployed printer. Yes, that much I can do. Good night, Professor. I do appreciate, though, that, like, although he is afraid and says that, like, being behind the scenes is cowardly, like, yeah, Montag is the bravest, but, like, he's still doing something, which I think is beautiful and profound and matters. Good night, Professor. Not good night. I'll be with you the rest of the night. A vinegar gnat tickling in your ear when you need me. but good night and good luck anyway. The door opened and shut. Montag was in the dark street again, looking at the world.